now that the 2015 NFL regular season is officially finished, it's time to put a bow on and wrap the 2015 regular season up and look forward to the offseason. And I'm here to begin my video series recapping each of the 32 NFL teams' 2015 NFL seasons, just how this will work in terms of order. Again, I'm emphasizing I'll do all 32 teams, which means if I'm not doing your team in this video, they'll be coming. The order that I'll use will be according to the 2016 NFL draft order. It's just the easiest way for me to do it. That way there's no biases, no anything like that. I just start from the top of the draft and work my way down all the way until we get to the last two teams that make it to Super Bowl 50. So I'm here, again, officially to kick off this series by taking a look at the team that finished with the #1 overall pick, the Tennessee Titans. 2015 can best be summarized as the following for the Tennessee Titans. It's when the Marcus Mariota era officially began and the Ken Whisenhunt era mercifully, quickly came to a close. And when you look heading into this season, there is, I think, some consternation amongst the Tennessee Titans fan base with the selection of Marcus Mariota #2 overall, because there was a lot of concern about his readiness for the NFL and how his game at Oregon in the system that they run at Oregon would translate to the NFL level. There are many Titans fans that thought they should have addressed another position such as defensive line with Leonard Williams. And while he's a good player at the end of the day, I hope the Titans fans understand and realize that the right selection was made, because when you look at it from this standpoint, let's say they took Leonard Williams last year in the draft. Now coming into this year, they choose between what at quarterback? Paxton Lynch, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz. You've got that option, or you could have gotten Mariota in last year's draft, who is better as a prospect than any of the top 3 quarterbacks in this year's draft. And now you could sit there and get somebody like a Laremy, Tunsil, a Joey Bosa, and Ezekiel Elliott, The point being is I think the Titans long-term as an organization came out the better because they took Mariota when they did. Now granted, you look at it and you say, this is a team that still finished 3-13. And after winning their first game of the season, they went 2-13 the rest of the way. This is still not a good football team. There's not a whole lot of reason for excitement. And I'll grant you, the season didn't go well. 3-13 is 3-13. And as Bill Parcells used to say, your record is who you are. And the Tennessee Titans at 3-13 are a bad football team, as the record indicates. They are a bad football team. I mean, they went 3-13 and play in the AFC South. That just can't happen. But at least you could say, if anything else, if you're going to be bad, go all the way, because the season isn't ultimately lost because they were able to move on from the Ken Whisenhunt era. You've got Marcus Mariota in the fold, and this is a team, again, that has ended up with the #1 overall pick in the 2016 NFL Draft. Now, you might sit there and say, for a team that goes 3-13, finishes in a tie for the worst record in the league, and ends up with the #1 overall pick in the draft, they didn't have a good season, and nothing went well. Well, even in the face of that, I think you can say that some things did go well for the Tennessee Titans throughout the course of the 2015 NFL season. They won more games than the year before. We went from 2 to 3, but it's progress, baby! But even when you look at the record, you could see progress in other areas, and you could see some things that did go well for this organization and bode well for this organization going forward. First, I start off with the flashes of brilliance that Marcus Mariota displayed. Whether it's that opening game against #1 overall pick Jameis Winston and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers where he threw for 4 touchdown passes. You remember the game in the middle of the season against the New Orleans Saints where he went off. The game against the Jaguars where he really went off as well. I mean, there were moments where Marcus Mariota flashed that elite potential that I thought he had coming out of Oregon. Now, we could work some on the consistency and be better across the board, but Mariota had some really, really good games and should have, if anything else, given you, if you're a Titans fan, a glimpse into the future and some hope for the future. And that's not all. You look at on the offensive side of the ball, Delanie Walker, I think, deserved Pro Bowl consideration this year, going over 1,000 yards receiving at the tight end position. He was clearly the best offensive weapon consistently throughout the year that the Tennessee Titans had, and he's been a really good player for this organization since they signed him in free agency away from the San Francisco 49ers after that 2012 season. You look at this Titans organization too, and even with Addressing offense with the first few picks in the 2015 NFL draft, with the bringing in of a consultant like Dick LeBeau of that ilk and that quality. This defense got a lot better throughout the course of the 2015 season. They weren't perfect. I mean, they still finished 27th in the league in points allowed per game, but this is a team that was 12th in total yards allowed, 7th in passing yards allowed. Now, that could be a little misleading because certain teams might have gotten up big on the Titans that didn't feel the need to throw the ball as much. But again, you look at the team that finished tied for 9th in the league in sacks, 12th overall in yards allowed. There was progress made. There were some really, really good games shown by this Tennessee Titans defense. So you have a defense that's young, that is improving, with a young franchise quarterback on the other side of the ball. You got defensive players such as Jurell Casey, one of the best defensive players that far too few people know about. A consistent Pro Bowler year in and year out, in my opinion, just an absolute beast. He's not of the level of a J.J. Watt and an Aaron Donald, who is, but he's a really, really damn good football player. And if the Tennessee Titans were a better team, Jurell Casey would get a lot more attention. The bottom line is if you're looking to build your defense around somebody, you could do a whole hell of a lot worse than the Jurell Casey. Believe me, I wish my Bears had a player of his caliber and his quality. You look at the free agent signing of Brian Orakpo. He wasn't a superstar stud, but he played the majority of the season. He gave him some type of pass rush on the edge. It was an improvement. It was an upgrade. It was a decent free agent signing for the Tennessee Titans. They've got a couple of building blocks there in their front seven. Also, I look at this team from a discipline standpoint. You know, it's one thing if you're a bad team. It's another thing if you're a bad team and you beat yourself. Well, you look at the Tennessee Titans, they were the second least penalized team in the National Football League. That, to me, speaks to some of the coaching that we had within the organization. That speaks to the players and the discipline that they had at times. The lack of shooting themselves in the foot. It's one thing if you're not good enough. It's one thing if you're just not as talented as the other guys. It's another thing to make it even easier for them to beat you. And when you're the second least penalized team in the league, that's at the end of the day. The Tennessee Titans did this, and it's as important as anything, above all else. If you're going to be bad, you fucking go balls deep in it, and you go all the way. You don't sit there and finish 5-11, 6-10, and get the 9th, 10th, 11th overall pick every year and think that that's instantly going to turn you around. If you're going to suck, go for broke. And over the past 2 years, the Tennessee Titans finished with the worst record, along with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the 2013 season, or 2014 season, excuse me, and ended up with the number 2 pick because they lost the tiebreaker. This time around, they said, oh, no. We're going to finish again in a tie for the worst record in the league. Actually, win one more game than we did the year before. But we'll get the tiebreaker this time, damn it, and end up with the number 1 overall pick. Now, if you're going to be bad, go all the way. Only one team gets the number 1 overall pick, and the Tennessee Titans did. So if you're going to suck, at least the Tennessee Titans did it right. But let's not kid ourselves. The Tennessee Titans still sucked. I mean, they finished with the tie for the worst record in the league, and they ended up, because of tiebreakers, due to the weakness of their strength of schedule, with the number 1 overall pick of the draft. So there isn't a whole lot that went well. There are plenty of things, in fact, that didn't. Number 1, they didn't keep Marcus Mariota healthy throughout the course of the season. Multiple injuries, in part because of their inability to protect him in multiple capacities. At the end of the day, this organization needed the star power, the life, the zuzu, the juice that Marcus Mariota brought to him. And if you can't keep the guy healthy, that's bad. That's big trouble for down the road. Because at the end of the day, as I've talked about before, and will continue to talk about for years to come, the number 1 skill that a quarterback can bring to the table if he wants to be a franchise NFL quarterback is the ability of availability, the ability to play all the time. And some of that's on the quarterback, some of it could just be dumb luck, but some of that is on the circumstance and situation that you put the quarterback in. And obviously you knew coming into the situation for Mariota as a rookie, it wasn't going to be great, and it most certainly wasn't. I mean, you're talking about an offense that finished 28th in the league in points scored per game, 30th in yards. This was really a team in particular that struggled to run the football. And even some of the games where you look at it and you say, oh, they didn't do terrible on the ground, that's because Marcus Mariota busted off an 80-yard run. You know, you've got your quarterback contributing some to the running totals. I mean, this is a team that finished well down the rankings in rushing yards per game. I mean, when you look at them, They're 29th in the league in third down conversion percentage. That lets you know that they struggled to run the ball on early downs, meaning there were a lot of third and long situations. Again, not ideal for a young quarterback. 24th in time of possession. Lets you know, again, this is not a big play, strike quick type of offense. That means that they struggled to run the football on early downs, leading to a lot of third and longs, leading to a lot of 3 and outs. Not a good situation to put a young quarterback in. When you combine that with an offensive line that struggled at times to effectively protect him in the passing game, and that lack of balance in the offense by having even a competent running game, that equals big problems. This team also went 1-5 in the AFC South. It was one thing if the Tennessee Titans were going to be bad this year, but that division they're in is not very good. The Texans won the division, and frankly, to me, they stink. The Indianapolis Colts showed me just how much they stink this year. Doesn't matter if they had luck or not, they still stunk up the joint. The Jacksonville Jaguars, they won 5 games this year. They still stink too. A terrible division, and the Tennessee Titans found a way to go 1-5 in the division. That's not good. The biggest key to success is winning in your own division, and the Titans have to get better on that in the future. They also lost 6 games by 7 or fewer points. Now, you can spin that in a positive way and say that they were close in a lot of games, and maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But at the end of the day, when you get that close and you're in that type of situation where you can win some of those games, you got to find a way to win some of those games. Think about how much better the aura around the Tennessee Titans organization would be if they'd have kept Mariota healthy all year, and they maybe would have taken 3 of those 6 games that they lost by 7 points or less or turned them into wins. Now all of a sudden you talk about a Tennessee Titans team that finished 6-10 behind a rookie quarterback in Marcus Mariota. Man, that looks really, really good for the future. It's not all bad because, again, this team still ended up with the number 1 overall pick of the 2016 NFL Draft. In terms of offseason priorities for this Tennessee Titans organization, I think you've got 3 of them. Number 1, and this is most important, is you just married yourself to Marcus Mariota for the next several seasons. You got to find the right head coach for Marcus Mariota. Now, he's already went through 2 NFL head coaches as a rookie, first with Whisenhunt and then Malarkey. Now, is it always a great idea to bring in yet another guy and basically kind of reboot for Mariota and have a 3rd head coach by the time he's gotten to his 2nd season? I don't know if it's the best situation, but at the same token, do you really want to run the risk of keeping it in-house and promoting Malarkey to the full-time head coach? Because maybe it does work, and maybe he figures out a way to get more out of Mariota and structure more of the offense around Mariota as opposed to what Whisenhunt tried to do or was willing to do. But what happens if it doesn't? Can you really afford to wait 2 or 3 years to find out that Malarkey's potentially a bum and then have to fire him, and then you're trying to make a big, important decision as an organization whether or not Marcus Mariota is your guy long term, and you could have potentially ruined the guy that had so much promise and potential? They've got to get this right guy for the head coaching position. They've got to get it right. Is that Chip Kelly? I don't know about all that. But they got to get it right. Whoever it is, it's got to be right. And then number 2, I think they got to find some quality veterans on both sides of the ball. It's great when you build from the draft and you get this young talent and you put it together, put them in the system for a while, they get familiar, they grow, they get better, they get comfortable with each other, there's chemistry there, there's continuity there, and that's all important. But every once in a while, you got to have some of those quality veterans on both sides of the ball. Like when they brought in Brian Orakpo this past offseason and signed him in free agency. Ended up being a solid move. They could probably use a veteran presence on that offensive line that they bring in via free agency. Maybe a wide receiver that they could bring in, an accomplished wide receiver, at least of some caliber or quality, for a young guy like a Kendall Wright and Dorial Green-Beckham to work with and get better in part because of the tutelage and mentoring that they get. The Tennessee Titans need to create a new culture, and part of creating that new culture is bringing in some people from other places that have been a part of good, positive, winning cultures and having them bring that into the Tennessee Titans organization. But ultimately, this team's got to hit it big in the draft. That's the other big priority. You've gotten your franchise quarterback. Now you've got to help him out. And you've got to make sure that you follow up what you did in this past draft by doing even better and really hitting it big in the 2016 NFL Draft. So what do the Tennessee Titans need to do to hit it big in the 2016 NFL Draft? Well, with the number 1 overall pick, you're going to probably see a lot of mock drafts that either have them taking Laremy Tunsil, the left tackle from Ole Miss, which makes a lot of sense, or it could be Joey Bosa, the edge rusher from Ohio State. which I think makes less sense, but a lot of other people are going to convince themselves that it does make a ton of sense. To me, as much as it's important to improve and upgrade the offensive line, especially with a guy that has the potential of the caliber of a Laremy Tunsil, because you've got to be able to protect Mariota. You're going to ride or die with Mariota long term as an organization. You got to be able to keep him upright, keep him healthy, and you got to be able to help him out. I only think that's the number 2 priority. To me, the number 1 priority has to be to get a big-time 3-down running back that can play with Mariota in the system that the Tennessee Titans would employ come 2016 and beyond around Marcus Mariota. They've got to find a running back, as their running back situation is boo-boo terrible. When arguably your most productive back is Dexter McCluster, you've got issues. Or Antonio Andrews, you've got even more issues. Bishop Sankey, former 2nd-round pick, bust. David Cobb, 5th-round pick. Are you really going to count on him much? These running backs in general for the Tennessee Titans showed little to nothing, and even less sometimes, throughout the entire 2015 season. As part of what put so much of the burden on Marcus Mariota is the inability to run the ball. It makes them more one-dimensional as an offense, especially in 3rd-down situations. That means teams can send more pressure towards Mariota because they're not concerned about getting stabbed through the heart on the back end with a draw up the middle, because the Titans couldn't run the ball. They've got to be able to find that running back. Now, in an ideal situation, if this was 20, 25 years ago, the Titans could arguably, in theory, be able to just sit there at number 1 and just take Ezekiel Elliott and not have a lot of people knock him. Now, at the end of the day, if this is an organization that graded out Ezekiel Elliott to be the best player in this draft, they should take him number 1. Because that's what you do. You take the best player on your board. Now, is he the best player in this draft? I don't think so. Is he a top 10 type of guy? Yes. In an ideal world, the Tennessee Titans would be able to sit there and get a guy like Ezekiel Elliott by trading back a few slots in the draft, picking up some additional picks in return, and still being able to get a guy who could be a big, huge help, because Elliott, based off of the system they played at Ohio State, is used to running out of the shotgun. He's used to running out of different formations, which are what you would anticipate the Tennessee Titans employing with Marcus Mariota as their starting quarterback. Ezekiel Elliott makes a ton of sense to me for that Titans team, even if we don't know yet what exact offensive system they're going to use. However, more likely than not, at least at this moment, it would look like they would take Tunsil at number 1 overall, because who knows if there's really going to be that guy that teams are going to want to be peeling up to number 1 overall to get anyways. So, yeah, in an ideal world, you'd love to be able to trade back if you're the Titans, but it just isn't always realistic. It isn't always going to happen. It's got to be right. You can't just drop your pants and give away that draft slot. You got to get something serious in return to go away from number 1 overall. So if you could take a Tunsil at number 1, and then in round 2 you got a guy like CJ Prosise from Notre Dame, another guy that I think would fit really well for the Tennessee Titans, a really good receiver out of the backfield, a guy that's good running out of the shotgun, running out of spread formations. How is he between the tackles at the NFL level? That remains to be seen. But if you come out of this draft with Laremy Tunsil in round 1 and CJ Prosise from Notre Dame in round 2, I think you've gotten yourself off to a really, really good start. Somewhere along the way, though, they're going to need to address the wide receiver position. I think Kendall Wright is ultimately destined for the slot in terms of his best NFL position, meaning that even when they play him out of the slot, they don't have much else outside. Justin Hunter, forget about it. Harry Douglas is And then you got Dorial Green-Beckham, who showed occasional flashes, and I expect to see a lot more out of in 2016, but that's pretty much it. They got to be able to find another legitimate option outside opposite Dorial Green-Beckham. That way they could slide Kendall Wright into the slot full-time and make that the only place that he played, and make that entire offense that much more dangerous because of their ability to stretch teams both horizontally and vertically down the field. So maybe a wide receiver at the beginning of round 2, like a Will Fuller or a Josh Doctson from TCU, might make a lot of sense, especially if in a round 3 you could still end up getting a guy like Alex Collins or a Kenneth Hunt or Kenneth Dixon, or somebody like a Paul Perkins. There are different options and different ways for them to go. Later on in this draft, in the middle portion of the draft, rounds 4 to 6 or 7, I would expect them to address the back portion of that defense. They need an edge rusher. They need somebody at the safety position. They could use some depth and talent at the cornerback position. But I think ultimately the Tennessee Titans philosophy for this draft has to be offense-centric. It has to be offense-based. You've gotten your potential franchise quarterback. Now you got to go build around him. Now you got to help him out. Now you got to do everything you can to ensure his long-term success. Because it doesn't matter if you drafted all defensive players in this draft and out of 6, 7 picks you hit 5 fucking home runs. If the offense is doo-doo and Mariota doesn't progress, your organization isn't going to matter 2 beans, and they're not going any damn where. So offense must be the philosophy for this Tennessee Titans organization with a minimum of 3 of their first 4 picks. And if they do that, then you could be looking at a Tennessee Titans offense, at least in 2016, that's going to be, dare I say, a little bit exciting to watch.